that shall come at our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests were committed to our charge. Amen. You ring the division bell for quorum.
The Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Justin Muturi, has ordered that the quorum bell be rung for 10 minutes, and this is to allow for members of Parliament to access their chambers, and this is to give the House the requisite numbers it requires for it to transact or commence business this afternoon. There being a lot for the House to consider during this particular session, and the quorum bell ordering that has been made in line with Standing Orders number 35. According to the current prevailing circumstances of COVID-19, the House requires at least 50 members of Parliament to be in the chambers for the business of the House to commence at any given time when the House is sitting. The member for Meru County, Honorable Bishop Kawira Mwangaza, will, pursuant to Standing Orders number 42A subsection 5, field or ask questions before the Cabinet Secretary for Sports, Culture and Heritage. The questions by Honorable Member for Meru County directed to the Cabinet Secretary for Sports is that could the Cabinet Secretary state the steps taken to establish and support talent nurturing facilities in the country, and this is in particular to Meru County. What measures has the ministry put in place to improve the said facilities in the country to international standards? What steps has the ministry taken? And this is to enhance the morale of the talented artists in the field of fine arts. Questions by Honorable Member for Meru County, Honorable Bishop Kawira Mwangaza, will be directed to the Departmental Committee of Sports, Culture and Matters Tourism. The Chief Whip in the National Assembly, Honorable Emmanuel Wangwe, has stepped out of the chamber to rally members to make their way into the chamber to allow the House commence business this afternoon. And from your screens, members of Parliament continue streaming into the chamber this afternoon with a lot lined up before the floor of the House. This being the sixth session of Parliament ahead of the 2022 general elections that are slated for August 9th. The House has a lot of bills to consider before then, and some of the key bills that the House is seeking to dispense with is the Elections Amendment Bill, Bill number 3 of the year 2020, by the Leader of Majority. From the signal.
Now for it.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair.
Order members, take your seats. Honour members, I wish to introduce to you a delegation of staff from the Parliament of Ghana who are seated in the Speaker's Gallery. The delegation comprises of 1, Mr. Obed Apia, who is an Assistant Public Affairs Officer. 2, Ms. Nelly Abe, similarly an Assistant Public Affairs Officer. Mrs. Sharon Kinfu, Assistant Public Affairs Officer also. And Mr. Ibrahim Ansa, also an Assistant Public Affairs Officer. Honour members, the delegation is in the National Assembly on a benchmarking visit, specifically to share experiences and learn good practices on the operations of our Public Communications Department, as well as the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit, among other areas. On my own behalf and that of the House, we wish to welcome the delegation to the National Assembly sitting this afternoon and wish them fruitful engagements during their stay in the country. I thank you. Next order.
Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions.
Honour members, there was a petition to be presented by the member from Sambweni, the Honourable Faisal Salima, who has since written to me requesting for deferment of the petition on account that he is engaged in the constituency today. I acceded to his request, and therefore that petition is dropped from the order paper and deferred to next week when the member will be available. Next.
Order number 5, papers.
Leader of the Majority Party.
Honourable Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Tuesday, the 22nd of March 2022. Number 1, legal notice number 32 relating to the company's beneficial ownership information, amendment regulations of 2022, and the explanatory memorandum from the Office of the Attorney General. Number 2, the National Government First Half Budget Implementation Review Report for the financial year 2021-2022 from the Office of the Controller of Budget. Number 3, the 5th Annual Report to the National Assembly on treaties ratified by Kenya from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Number 4, the Annual Report of the National Land Commission on enhancing land governance for sustainable development for the financial year 2020-2021. Number 5, the performance report of the Independent Policing Oversight Authority for the period January to June 2021. Number 6, the report of the Auditor General and financial statements of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Kenya branch for the year ended 30th of June 2018 and the certificate therein. Number 7, the report of the Auditor General and financial statements of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Kenya branch for the year ended 31st of December 2018 and certificate therein. And number 8, the report of the Auditor General for the financial statements, again of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Kenya branch for the year ended 31st of December 2019 and the certificate therein. And number 9, the report of the Auditor General and financial statements of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Kenya branch for the year ended 31st of December 2020 and the certificate therein. 10 is the reports of the Auditor General and financial statements in respect to the following institutions for the year ended 30th of June 2021 and the certificates therein, and these are the Office of the Controller of Budget, the Kenya Slum Upgrading Low-Cost Housing and Infrastructure Trust Fund, the Railway Development Levy Fund Holding Account, Contingencies Fund, Equalization Fund, the Revenue Statements for the Judiciary, East Africa Tourist Visa Collection Fee Collection Account, the Kenya Shipyards Limited, State Department for Mining, State Department for Planning, Prisons Industries Revolving Fund, and State Department for Fisheries, Aquaculture, and Blue Economy. The last batch, number 11, is the reports of the Auditor General and financial statements in respect to the following institutions for the year ended that of June 2020 and the certificates therein. And these are Simlo Seeds Company Limited, Chemirel Sugar Company, Egerton University Investment Company, the Agricultural Finance Corporation, Rural Electrification and Renewable Energy Corporation, Dekut Enterprises Limited, Water Resources Authority, Rivertex East Africa Limited, Kenya Leather Development Council, Bombers of Kenya, Simlo Seeds Company Uganda Limited, and lastly, Lake Victoria North Waterworks Agency. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Very well. The next, the Chairman, Select Committee on National Government Constituencies Development Fund Committee, or a representative to the chair. We move on. Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 7, questions and statements.
Move to the first segment, segment on questions. The first question is by the member for Kwale County, the Honorable Suleika. The Honorable Suleika Hassan. Next question is by the member for Jomfu, the Honorable Badi Twalib Ali.
Mr. Speaker, my name is Honorable Badi Twalib Badi, not Badi Twalib Ali. Mr. Speaker, I raise first question number 74 of 2022 to the Cabinet Secretary for Transport, Infrastructure, Housing, Urban Development and Public Works. Question number 1, Mr. Speaker, when will the government remit compensation amounting to 664,125 shillings to Mr. Salim Said of Maganda Village, Miritini Ward in Jomvu constituency, whose land was compulsory acquired by the government on 6th June 2015 to pave way for the construction of the standard gauge rail. Question number 2, Mr. Speaker, considering the inflation rate from 2015 to date, when the agreed compensation was expected to be paid out, could the Cabinet Secretary enhance the previous valuations to take into account inflation? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
A question will be replied to before the Departmental Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing. The next question is by the member for Magarini, the Honorable Michael Kingi.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I rise to ask question number 76 of 2022, directed to the Cabinet Secretary for Transport, Infrastructure, Housing, Urban Development and Public Works. 1, could the Cabinet Secretary list the corporate social responsibility activities, if any, being undertaken by the contractors constructing the Baricho Langobaya Bridge and Sabaki Bridge Baricho Road, meant to benefit the residents of Magarini constituency? 2, could the contractors, through the ministry, consider making infrastructural improvement to Marekezo Primary School, Baricho Secondary School, Mekatili Secondary School, and Wakala Girls Secondary School as part of their CSR? Thank you.
Again, the question will be replied to before the Departmental Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing. Last question is by the member for Meru County, the Honorable Bishop Kawira Mwangaza.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. My question is 081 of 2022 to the Cabinet Secretary for Sports, Culture and Heritage. 1, could the Cabinet Secretary state the steps taken to establish and support talent nurturing facilities in the country, particularly in Meru County? 2. What measures has the ministry put in place to improve the said facilities in the country to international standards? 3. What steps has the ministry taken to enhance the morale of talented artists in the field of fine arts? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question will be replied to before the Departmental Committee on Culture, Sports, Culture and Tourism. For the second time, question by the member for Kwale County, the Honorable Suleika Hassan. Member for Kwale County. Member being absent, not desiring to be present, question is dropped. There's no second segment, so move to the next order.
Order number 8, the Coffee Bill, Senate Bill number 22 of 2020. Second reading. Question to be put.
Is this the member for? The member. The member being entertained by the member for Kibwezi West. Is that the member for Ugenya? And this other one who is roaming all over. Honourable members, the debate on this bill was concluded before the House went to the short recess. What remained was for the question to be put, which I hereby do, that the Coffee Bill, Senate Bill number 22 of 2020, be now read a second time. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
A bill for an act of Parliament to provide for the establishment of the Coffee Board of Kenya and the Coffee Research Institute, to provide for the role of the national and county government, to provide for the regulation, development, and promotion of coffee industry, and for connected purposes.
Next order.
Order number 9. The Elections Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 41 of 2021, second reading.
Honourable members, this is a bill sponsored by the Constitutional Implementation Oversight Committee, CIOC. It was moved, seconded, and there were 3 contributors, being the Honorable Midio Thiambo, the Honorable Akinyo Bara, and the person who was on the floor is Jogona Wanjiku, who has a balance of 8 minutes. I believe that must be the member for Kiamba, is it? Member for Kiamba, you have a balance of 8 minutes. The member has still not gotten acclimatized to knowing what time the House sits. And I'm sure he must have been informed that when the House resumes, he will be the first one to continue. Well, member being absent, not desiring to be present, he then loses his balance of 8 minutes and cannot contribute further to this bill. So any other member is at liberty to contribute. And I see from the request, the Honorable Dan Manzo, member for Makueni. The Honorable Dan Manzo, member for Makueni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity. Sorry, I was trying to share with Honorable Wamalwa the implication of this amendment. Mr. Speaker, in my understanding, I think it's a good amendment, and it is dealing with the nomination of members to the county assemblies. Mr. Speaker, what has been the practice? When a political party meets the threshold, then what will happen is that somebody who is not from a particular county, giving an example like the county of Makueni, we may get a nominee from another county like Garissa or Nairobi or even Mombasa. And that person who does not come from Makueni and may not know the implication of being around that place in Makueni or the issues in Makueni ends up sitting in this county assembly. What this new law is trying to do, Mr. Speaker, although it is deleting quite a number of huge sections which was previously there, Mr. Speaker, is that you limit that particular nomination to that particular county, Mr. Speaker, so that if there are nomination slots to be given for a political party following the political party list, which is presented to the Commission and which moves from priority on number 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on the people who have been nominated in that particular county, Mr. Speaker, then automatically that political party can only restrict the nominations from that particular county, Mr. Speaker. And it is, this particular section has been abused before, Mr. Speaker. It is seeking to balance with the people who come or who are resident to that particular county, Mr. Speaker. And again, also, the original idea was to acquire the 2/3 gender, which has happened very well, Mr. Speaker, in the counties. The 2/3 gender has really been met in a lot of counties, and this is the purpose of this particular law, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, it has been abused, tried to top up the gender. People have come from different counties and have been taken to a place they don't even know. The people there don't know them, and they have to learn living with them, and they have to learn the issues of that particular area, and therefore, so that they can be effective to the county they are going to be. Mr. Speaker, then this particular amendment has come. In my opinion, Mr. Speaker, I think it's a good amendment by the Honorable Kioni, and I think it will serve purpose. It will improve our county assemblies. It will improve the nomination process so that patronage, Mr. Speaker, it does not become the order of the day, and that there could be the people in the particular area, Mr. Speaker, can be served fairly and can be able to see their own people probably topping up the gender or people with disability, or Mr. Speaker, or also special interest groups can be taken care of very well through the nominations to the county assemblies by a political party. Mr. Speaker, I support, and I think it's a great amendment. I'm sure that particular committee has thought of it very carefully. And Honorable Keoni, who I can't see in the House today, most probably is doing the campaigns, I believe meant very well for the nation, and is going to make changes which are going to be positive, and that particular section of law will not be abused by political parties any longer. I am sure, and I'm aware a lot of people in politics are waiting for that particular moment, and while they are assisting in politics or happen to be very good friends with the political party leaders or influential people in a political party, their misconceived ideas are going to be curtailed by this law, and so that only the deserving people get the nomination and in a straightforward manner and can be able to serve their people right. I thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do support.
Yes.
Member for Funyula.
Not yet. Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving this opportunity to contribute on this very important bill. Honorable Speaker, the issue of nominating members to the various county assemblies has always been a very, very big debate. That's why I allowed the efforts of the committee to bring some amendments that bring some semblance and order to the nomination process. Honorable Speaker, it has been part of our history that after every election, we do a top-up. And this top-up has always come as a reason that some segments of the society that probably are disadvantaged in terms of campaigns. So under the old constitution, nominations were provided for top-up purposes. Honorable Speaker, with the constitution of 2010, brought in the issue of gender parity, so that no single elective body should have more than 1/3 gender. Honorable Speaker, definitely and naturally, in many constituencies, in many counties, women and the youths stand disadvantaged. Women, the youths, and the disabled stand disadvantaged. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, this has normally been an avenue to nominate women, youths, and the disabled person so that their voices can be heard and represented in the various county assemblies. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, the proposal or the proposed amendment to the Election Act by the committee is timely because it does 2 to 3 things at the same time. Number one, Honorable Speaker, it entrenches the provisions in the Constitution that requires nomination to fill up so that we get the third gender rule. Second, Honorable Speaker, it gives room for members to be appointed, nominated from the areas where they vote and they live and they serve. Honorable Speaker, either by accident or by design, many party nominations end up being given to people or persons who do not belong to that particular ward. It has been a practice, and is hopefully these amendments, Honorable Speaker, will cure this problem. There has been very many complaints, Honorable Speaker, that because of friendship to party leaders or party functionaries or party machineries, you end up nominating persons purporting to represent a certain area, yet they do not live there, they do not vote there. Honorable Speaker, a joke has always been said of Busia, and this has been one of the areas that we members of ODM from Busia have received a bashing for the fact that we have always tended or ended up appointing or nominating members to the Busia County Assembly that are not residents of Busia. And we do hope that this particular amendment, Honorable Speaker, will cure that anomaly once and for all. Honorable Speaker, we need in the amendment to have very clear criteria for nominating members of the County Assembly. Because the County Assembly, Honorable Speaker, remain the backbone of devolution. If we don't get the right persons to sit in the County Assembly, we will continuously lose the gains were envisaged under the co-devolution system. Honorable Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to urge all those party functionaries that abrogate themselves or give themselves the duty to nominate persons to sit in the county assemblies to do proper evaluation. Honorable Speaker, it's a shame, Honorable Speaker, for a grown-up man to record that he is disabled, yet is a grown-up man walking 2 feet to get nominated to the county assembly for simply purpose of getting a salary and doing nothing. Honorable Speaker, some years back, it is on record, one functionary from the once roaring Simba party nominated his daughters, 2 of them to sit in the county assembly at the chagrin of everybody else. Honorable Speaker, I do hope such bad manners will come to an end so that the Simba party, everybody knows it, which has a symbol as a lion. We hope, Honorable Speaker, over time, we hope this act will cure that particular aspect. Honorable Speaker, I would also propose an amendment to the same, that this nomination actually, the list sent after the elections, because quite a number of very hard-working MCAs are going to lose elections, not because of anything else, probably because they have not done well, or probably because of the party dynamics, or probably some small issues here and there. We shouldn't lose them for that particular purposes. Honorable Speaker, we should also make an amendment so that even a member of parliament who is going to lose this election, instead of going to stay outside in the cold, the experience he has gained here, if he was an active member, he should be allowed to go sit in the county assembly so that they provide oversight so that we have devolution working. Honorable Speaker, of course, there are quite a number of people in this house from various formations who are already in trouble. We should find a way out, because it would seem nice a practice that even senior people are going down to occupy those positions. Honorable Speaker, with those few remarks, I support, but I do believe that the committee of the whole House will have an opportunity to make a few amendments to align the same reality on the ground and to make sure we save and strengthen devolution. With those few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I support.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity.
It's me.
Mr. Speaker, I also rise to support this election amendment bill of 2021. Mr. Speaker, this bill is an extremely important bill because, Mr. Speaker, it deals with the issue of nomination of party lists for party list members. And, Mr. Speaker, what happens is that we are supposed to ensure that the houses, representative houses of parliament and also our assemblies have all cadre of representation. In other words, we are supposed to have women, we are supposed to have youth, we are supposed to have people living with disabilities. And this new amendment proposes also that we be considerate of region. Mr. Speaker, the proposal that has been given in this amendment is that for someone to be nominated to be an MCA in a certain county, they must be a registered voter in that county. And, Mr. Speaker, it makes sense because when you look at the responsibilities that are assigned to a member of the county assembly, just like a member of parliament, is oversight, representation, and what is the third one, Mr. Speaker? Anyway, and oversight, representation, and legislation. Now, Mr. Speaker, it is difficult for someone to be nominated to a county which is not their home county and purport to be representing the people of that county. It doesn't make sense. Mr. Speaker, it also doesn't make sense for them to be legislating on behalf of people that are not from their region. If you are nominated to a region that's not your region, you don't even know the problems of the people. So what kind of legislation are you going to bring aboard in that assembly? So generally, I think what would happen is that such individuals would just draw a salary for 5 years and be a nuisance. Mr. Speaker, we also have to understand that there has to be cohesion. And there's also a lot of dynamics in our county assemblies. When you bring in a stranger to an assembly, a person who doesn't speak the language, a person who does not connect with the people, really, Mr. Speaker, when the dynamics of that county are occurring, that person is not going to be able to contribute anything. So, Mr. Speaker, I think this is a logical, very, very logical amendment to the Elections Act, and I support it, and I would like to urge my fellow colleagues to support it. Of course, Mr. Speaker, there are also other issues that we've noted in the issue of elections. For example, these party lists are presented before elections. And my colleague has just ably put it, that sometimes there are people who should be considered for nomination to be in those party lists. But because they had already declared to be candidates, they are knocked out because this list goes before the elections. So, Mr. Speaker, maybe going forward we might consider amending the Election Act to also ensure that those people that lose out in the party primaries, for whatever reason, can also be considered at a later stage. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, I support. Thank you for the opportunity.
Honorable Amalwa, and given you jointly with the Honorable Mbui.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, first and foremost, I want to thank Honorable Kioni for this particular amendment. This is a very critical amendment, Mr. Speaker, because it's trying to operationalize Article 177 of the Constitution as far as membership of the County Assembly is concerned. Mr. Speaker, Article 177 of the Constitution, particularly 1B, it gives a provision for the membership of the County Assembly through the special seats. These special seats, Mr. Speaker, are supposed to be given for purposes of managing the two-third gender rule, so that none of the gender goes beyond the two-third. Mr. Speaker, this is a matter that has been abused. I've seen many county assemblies, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to nomination. You found somebody has been nominated in Kilifi County, and he comes from Siaya County. It has also happened, Mr. Speaker, in Trans Nzoia, where the County Assembly, Mr. Speaker, nominated an MCA in Trans Nzoia, and that particular MCA comes from Bungoma County, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the key functions of a member of the County Assembly is to legislate, is to represent, is to oversight. When it comes to oversighting, Mr. Speaker, is particularly in line with that county, the relevant county, Mr. Speaker. So it goes without saying, Mr. Speaker, it will add a lot of value if you nominate someone who is a resident, who is a voter from that particular county. Because when it comes to matters of representation, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to representation, each county has some unique cultural practices, or it has its own traditions. So you need somebody, Mr. Speaker, who will be able to represent them effectively, somebody who is registered from that particular county. This is something that has been abused, Mr. Speaker, mostly by party leaders, Mr. Speaker, because this issue has cut across all the political parties, Mr. Speaker. And this bill is coming to heal so that a given county has a given jurisdiction, Mr. Speaker, if they have a provision to nominate, they'll only nominate one of their own. Somebody who is conversant of that particular county, Mr. Speaker. So when it comes to matters of representation, matters of legislation, matters of oversight, Mr. Speaker, it will be done effectively. Mr. Speaker, people living with disabilities, this is an issue, Mr. Speaker, that must be handled, because we've seen some people who come from different counties being nominated to represent the people living with disabilities in different counties, Mr. Speaker, and yet they don't even know them. So this will bring a lot of hygiene as far as nominations are concerned, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we move forward, last week we had a meeting in Trans Nzoia County where we met different aspiring candidates as a party, Ford Kenya. And this is a matter that came up, Mr. Speaker. The county assemblies were raising, the candidates were raising, that some people, Mr. Speaker, they are involved heavily as far as matters of the party are concerned. But when it comes to nomination, Mr. Speaker, the party leaders, including Honorable Munyinyi, who is our party leader, Mr. Speaker, they tend to nominate people from other counties. Maybe they are related, or they are girlfriends, or they are boyfriends, Mr. Speaker. So this is an issue which is going to resolve a lot of problems. Mr. Speaker, sometimes back, Mr. Speaker, we wanted to propose, if it allows, so that this party list, Mr. Speaker, can be presented after, as opposed to before, so that even if it comes to controlling the two-third gender, they can give nominations to those women who had attempted and lost the elections, the best losers. I remember it was Honorable Nyokabi in the last parliament. I don't know how that proposal disappeared. If we can find a way, Mr. Speaker, and be able to amend, if you allow, if it's not going to be significant, we amend when it comes to the committee of the whole house, so that if possible, the party list can be presented afterwards, so that political parties can also reward, particularly those women who attempted to run in the elections and they were the best in terms of losing. Somebody who has made an attempt, not just getting people from nowhere, Mr. Speaker, and they find themselves being sworn in. If that allows, Mr. Speaker, to be very good, and my brother here from Siaya is agreeing with me, we can propose that amendment so that the party list can come after elections, so that those women who played a lot of role, who added a lot of value as far as campaigns are concerned, they can also be rewarded and can be able to represent their cases effectively, particularly, Mr. Speaker, when they come from their respective counties. I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I support.
Member for Ugunja.
Huh? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I wish to, from the outset, to support this amendment bill as proposed by the Honorable Jeremiah Kioni. And I wish the House could pay some attention to the issues I'm going to raise. It must be understood clearly that first and foremost, this top-up list, or what we are calling the party list, is not just about nominating women. it is not meant just for women to be nominated. It actually presupposes that either of the two genders can fall short of the 1/3 quantum in the respective assemblies. And therefore, even as we draw this list, usually we craft it in a zebra manner. That is, we have a woman followed by a man, by a woman, and so on and so forth. Assuming, of course, that no one clearly knows which gender will have fallen short of the requisite numbers in the respective assemblies. Mr. Speaker, it is indeed true that this process has been abused considerably in the past. And this bill is attempting to cure this problem. And the only thing I would want to add here, Mr. Speaker, is that the principle behind the party lists is that political parties that actually eventually nominate their preferred persons to these assemblies is supposed to have latitude, is supposed to have the leeway to determine who in particular they would want to have nominated in the respective assemblies. And therefore, it is also true, therefore, that if you leave it open, that any person can be picked to represent a political party at any assembly, then there is a tendency for people to clamor or to fight for the few chances that are available in those assemblies that are considered as lucrative. And the assemblies are mostly in the cities such as Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, and what have you. And therefore, this bill is going to once and for all address that problem, such that if for instance, you are not a voter in the great county of Siaya, that at no given time will you ever find your name in the party list of whichever party. Secondly, it must be understood that the party has got the leeway to reward its people. Its people here means its members, its registered members. And therefore, it depends on how the party has performed. The determination of how many members are nominated by a political party to a particular assembly depends on how that particular party has performed in the elections of that particular year. And for instance, therefore, if you have a party like my friend Honorable David Ochieng, I don't know where he is, if you have got a small party such as Honorable David Ochieng's party, and you end up getting a 0 seat, you end up not getting any word under your leadership in the elections, then it follows clearly that you are not entitled to nominate any single person to the assembly of Siaya or any other assembly for that matter. So that it creates parity, it creates equity. It rewards parties for their performance in the elections. It also rewards individuals who belong to those parties for the good work they've been able to do in those parties. And that's why I also agree with the proposal being put forth by my colleagues, the Honorable Manzo and Honorable Omalwa, that if it were possible, of course we can still effect that through legislation. These lists need to be presented long after elections, post-elections, when we are clear what is the landscape, when we are clear about the landscape, who has performed how and who is it that has worked how or how much that deserves nomination to what kind of assembly. So that is very important. But finally, Mr. Speaker, I think it's also important, even as political parties present their nominees or the list of nominees to the IBC, that we use that opportunity to enhance the capacity of the respective assemblies. Because as you know, the law currently allows any person, really, without any minimum level of education, to be elected as an MCA. That is now clear, or as an MP, for that matter. So this list, this party list, provides an opportunity for the political parties to enhance capacity in the assemblies. How? They can choose to nominate people with requisite capacities, people with certain academic background, people with certain qualifications, who can then go and add value in those assemblies. But if long after elections or before elections, you are presenting names of people who have got similar handicap, similar problems as the ones who are being elected. So what are you doing? What are you doing? Why can't you use this opportunity as a political party to pick the very best? Even amongst all these categories, even among the disabled, there are people who are qualified, eminently qualified. Among the youth, there are people who are qualified. Let's use this opportunity in the party list process to enhance the capacity of the county assemblies. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I'm glad that we are addressing this, we are discussing this bill, we are debating this bill early enough. Immediately I've resumed from recess. It's my prayer that we can be able to dispense with all these election-related bills way before we break finally in June, so that the IBC can be able to put in place mechanisms to implement this proposal that we are passing in this House. Because some of these proposals are going to be integral, are going to be important in the management of the elections of August 9th this year. And therefore, I am happy, Mr. Speaker, that the House Business Committee has prioritized this bill and similar bills that have got something to do with the elections of August this year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support.
Honorable Raso, you have put praise and intervention.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I rise under Standing Order 95. Considering the mood, and also the speakers are unanimous about this particular single amendment to the election bill. For that reason, I want to request the mover be asked to reply so that we move to the next bill, which is also about election. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Well, honour members, you want the member for Saku, the Honorable Russell, rise in his place and claim that the mover be called upon to reply. I've seen some murmurs from some of you. I have no way of knowing whether that is the mood, unless I get it from yourselves. I'm sure many of you now remember the famous words of Speaker James Lentho, spoken on the 4th of January 1642. So, honour members, I put the question, which is that the mover be called upon to reply. Will as many as that opinion say aye? Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Mover, Honorable Lento Imaga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I want to, on the outset, to thank all the members who contributed to this bill, amendment bill, that they have really done what is necessary to ensure that the bill is debated well and also to be considered for passing. I also want to thank the committee members who worked tirelessly to ensure that we visited several stakeholders and got the necessary information and also inputs on the bill. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, I also want to appeal to members. Now that we are almost towards the tail end of our session here, and there has been a problem of quorum, I just want to appeal to them that this is a very critical bill, amendment bill. So I appeal to them that we turn up during question time when the questions will be put, so that we can be able to pass the bill without any hiccups. I beg to reply.
Order members, Honourable members, I put the question, which is that the Elections Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 41 of 2021, be now read a second time. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Elections Act number 24 of 2011.
Honourable members, is the Honourable Wandai here? He's gone out. He's made some very passionate plea about election-related bills. And I'm therefore also at the request by the leader of majority and the chairperson of the Constitutional Implementation Oversight Committee, I reorganize the order paper so the next order shall be order number 15. Next order.
Order number 15, the Election Campaign Financing Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 37 of 2021, second reading.
Honorable Ento Imaga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to move that the Election Campaign Financing Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 37 of 2021, now be read the second time. Mr. Speaker, the bill seeks to amend the various sections of the Election Campaign Finance Act 2013, number 42 of 2013, in order to align its provisions with the Election Act 2011, and further proposes amendments that will enable its full implementation. The bill seeks to repeal the provisions of the Act establishing the expenditure committee that is established by a candidate, political party, or a referendum committee for purposes of regulating spending by a candidate or political party or a referendum committee during the election period on a referendum campaign period, as the case may be. The committee observed that public funding of political parties alone cannot sustain campaign requirements of political parties, and the candidates, thus, it was necessary for candidates and political parties to raise additional funds for for campaigns privately. That it will be unfair, Mr. Speaker, for political parties or candidates to be required to raise money from personal sources and then require them to establish an expenditure committee consisting of third parties to manage and regulate their expenditure during election period or referendum campaign period. The bill proposes to repeal the political party expenditure committee, the independent candidate expenditure committee, and the referendum expenditure committee, respectively. That the bill further proposes the repeal of Section 10 of the Principal Act, which provides the requirement of a candidate or political party or referendum committee to submit expenditure report to a commission containing all records of income expenditure. The bill proposes to repeal Section 17 of the Principal Act and mandates candidates or political parties to disclose any surplus funds to the Commission and guides how the surplus will be applied. Mr. Speaker, this is quite unfair, because if you are raising money from your own sources, including even selling your own assets like land, and then you bring somebody from outside, a party from outside, and maybe they can also be infiltrated by maybe opponents. So the bill is provide that provision of the law above which requires political parties candidates after end of election to declare a surplus and afterwards surrender the same to the charitable organization is quite untenable. In the bill further proposes to repeal Section 27 of the Principal Act, which mandates the Auditor Controller General, upon the request by the Commission, to audit the accounts of the campaign expenses of candidates, political parties, or expenditure committees. This is because almost all the funds applied in the campaigns are privately sourced funds. Mr. Speaker, the committee in the process of going for public participation had also interacted with IBC, the Attorney General, the Department of Justice, the Kenya Law Reform Commission, the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, the NGEC, the NCCK, and Inter-Religious Council of Kenya to hear their views. The committee also had diverse dates undertook the hearings on the bill in the counties of Nairobi, Nyamira, Bungoma, Homa Bay, Busia, Embu, Kirinyaga, Meru, Laikipia, Kilifi, and Kwale. Mr. Speaker, the Kenyan political environment requires that a candidate or a political party ventures into elective politics should source for and have sufficient resources to sustain the campaigns. In most cases, the candidate is required to raise the funds from their own personal sources. These sources have involved sale of assets like land by candidates in order to raise enough resources for the campaigns. It therefore becomes hard for candidates who has disposed all his assets, for example, to be required to establish an expenditure committee consisting of parties or persons who may not be the same ideals to manage the funds. So this amendment bills goes along to amend those sections and also to assist in ensuring that the committees that are meant to oversee the expenditure are actually removed from the Principal Act. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, with the competitive political environment, the risk of infiltration and undue influence from members of the candidate or political party or expenditure committee by opponents in thus breaching the mistrust between such candidate or strong political party and the expenditure committee members. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to dwell much on this. I beg to move and request my deputy, Honorable Kaluma, to second.
Honorable Kaluma, campaign financing.
Yes, I thank you, Honorable Speaker. I stand to second the chair in moving the election campaign financing amendment bill, National Assembly Bill of 2021. Honorable Speaker and members, only two issues. This law is required to go into force beginning this election. And what it requires is that from the time of party primaries, what we call nominations, to even the time of elections, the political parties, the referendum committees, all candidates of political parties and independent candidates must form what is called an campaign expenditure committee, to which they should give all the money they should be using in the elections. Honorable Speaker, a short while ago there were regulations which were brought, which were nullified by this Parliament on the recommendations of the Committee on Delegated Legislation. But these still remain in the substantive law, and if we do not act on them, Honorable Speaker, they will be required to enter into force
beginning this nominations, which is why it is very urgent. What we propose to do under this bill, honorable members, is to delete those requirements being imposed on all candidates of parties, on all political parties, and the referendum committees, whenever they are, to form those expenditure committees. And the principle, honorable Speaker, is just one. The campaigns for the political parties and even the campaigns of independent candidates, the political party candidates, are not being funded by the state. So they are not, public funds to be required to be given. Honorable Speaker, if we were to allow this bill to enter into force, and I'm happy it has become impracticable, it would mean I just time the expenditure committee of my opponent, buy them out, and they disappear. So these monies are an individual's money. This law, in the manner it is crafted, is infringing on the right to property, including how you handle your money. We are not, honorable Speaker, removing the requirement that an individual can disclose, if required by IEBC, the accounts from which you are drawing funds. An individual must state the capping limits in law. We are not enforcing them, but we are making alterations also on the requirement that these expenditures be audited, because the Auditor General, in terms of the constitutional mandate, honorable Speaker, is to audit public funds, not private funds. We are saying that we are removing these expenditure committees because the bill, though seeking accountability, is based on the US law, where particular candidates, particularly presidential candidates, are funded by the public coffers. Honorable Speaker, those are the things we seek to do. We are securing accountability. We are now leaving it to the IEBC if they want to put in the Electoral Code of Conduct a requirement that you disclose your accounts and of course, to oversight it in the manner they can. The other reason as to why this law, honorable Speaker, has been impracticable or impossible to enforce is that if you look at the number of candidates we have, even at this level, and this I'm addressing to Kenyans, if you look at the number of candidates, even at the level of party primaries and nominations, they are in thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands. And this is in respect of all political parties. Can our Office of the Auditor General, go auditing all of them? But number two, even if with their skeleton staff they were to do so, is it public funds they are engaging in? So we're just deleting those requirements of expenditure committee, but the accountability measures, the financial caps for campaigns are still there. And with those few comments, honorable Speaker, I beg to second, and I ask the members to support this so that we can expedite and cleanse that environment. Thank you, honorable Speaker.
I propose a question, which is that the Election Campaign Financing Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 37 of 2021, be now read a second time. Member for Kabuchai.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. To give my views on this very important particular bill. Mr. Speaker, when we make such decisions, we must first differentiate between public funds and private funds. When one looks for his money, Mr. Speaker, and wants to run a campaign of his own, Mr. Speaker, those are private funds. Mr. Speaker, in Kenya, we do not have a central pocket where all candidates go and draw money to use to campaign. Mr. Speaker, if there are countries where they contribute for you, then after the campaign, Mr. Speaker, you must declare what is balancing. Mr. Speaker, again, the law, the bill does not understand or recognize that even we have losers, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when you lose and you have run and you lost, Mr. Speaker, when they want to come and audit you, say, declare how much. So, Speaker, one, you are paying for with lack of money. You have lost money, Mr. Speaker. And again, they want you, Mr. Speaker, to declare even what is left from your committee. So, Speaker, as one puts it very clearly, one does not need rocket science to finish you, Mr. Speaker. He only comes and buys your committee. And then your committee will run away with the money, Mr. Speaker. This will bring more problems than can manage. And as well, Mr. Speaker, this is tedious. It is tedious because when does this law begin to work, Mr. Speaker? Does it work before nominations? Does it work after nominations? If it's before nominations, Mr. Speaker, we have thousands of candidates running from MCS to members of parliament to governors, women reps, even the president, Mr. Speaker. We cannot, the office does not have enough staff to put right every candidate and how much one should run, Mr. Speaker. So according to me, Mr. Speaker, I think this is not right. And again, Mr. Speaker, it's only the candidate who is a vision bearer. He is a vision bearer, Mr. Speaker, who knows the interest of him. Mr. Speaker, you can have a committee that doesn't know, does not believe, does not have the vision. And Mr. Speaker, they will abuse the fund that you intend to spend very well. And Mr. Speaker, when you look at this bill, Mr. Speaker, we tend also to give a way out, Mr. Speaker. And it's a leakage. It's a strategic leakage, Mr. Speaker, in that one has how much for this budget. It's also, Mr. Speaker, it depends. When you want one to have a certain amount, Mr. Speaker, and we come from different constituencies, we come from different demands. One running a constituency in Nairobi, Mr. Speaker, is different from one running a constituency in Bungoma. Mr. Speaker, we cannot have a standard view, a standard value that you need such an amount for this area, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and this one, I support the removal. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Kitui West. Member is not there. Honorable Kimunya. Majority Leader.
Yes, thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I stand to support the committee on this bill, which is not only very important but very timely, especially given the season we are in and the contradictions we have, that we have a law but we don't have regulations. And we all know the history of that issue is IBC seemed to have delayed in bringing the regulations, and when they brought them in the wrong way and the wrong format. Hence, we have a law, we don't have regulations in terms of what to do, but it could well jeopardize the whole election and bring a lot of tension because people will be challenging that people have been elected, they didn't have these committees, and yet the committees cannot operate without the regulations, and hence it's important, first of all, we tidy up our law. In principle, and I want to ask the member for Kabjai to know, in principle, the law is not bad. It is premised on the law that operates in the US. But unfortunately, because of our cut and paste, we seem to just cut and paste things to bring the US law or the United States of America law into Kenya without looking at what else needed to be done to make it to accord with our local dynamics. In the US, any candidate who is running, whether as an independent or the political party or whatever, is obligated to form what is called a political action committee. And it's that political action committee that fundraises on behalf of the candidate and does everything for the candidate, and then accounts for the monies. There's also restrictions as to how much any person can give. I believe right now is $2,900 that can be given by any one individual to a candidate. So there are restrictions in terms of that. And when that money is pulled together, you then use it for all manners to do with your campaign, except for personal issues, which means you can't buy your suit because you need to appear as a candidate and say, people have fundraised for me. You can't, there are some limitations as to what you can use on that money. And contrary to what we have provided in our law, that account is never closed until you stop being a candidate. So even if you lose an election or win an election, so long as you're still desirous of running in the next election, you can continue keeping that committee. Now, unfortunately, in our situation, we had thought after an election, within 3 months, you must close this account and give the money to youth activities. Now, what has my fundraising got to do with youth, women, and disability activities? You know, it doesn't make sense. And that's what I'm saying. In our cut and paste, we never thought about some of these things. Because when people are fundraising, they'll be fundraising on a certain issue. If I'm fundraising on issues to do with Kipiperi, it's a potato growing area. I want people to see that if you help me, I'll help you agitate for potato issues. Or, for example, a certain governor in Mombasa might be looking at the blue economy. I have Kipiperi Mountain, I'll be looking at climate change. So, if I fundraise money to then agitate for climate change, then you tell me that after 3 months, that money should go to youth, women, and issues of disability. It will be a con, it will be a fraud on the people who actually gave money of climate change issues in Parliament when the money is directed elsewhere. So it's a timely thing that much as this has been occasioned by the need to synchronize and regulations, or the absence of regulation and the operation of the law, that it also gives us an opportunity to sit back and say, yes, we need a law that will control electoral financing, because we also don't want people receiving their money from some terrorist organizations or some undesirable activities that happen in the streets at night. You know, because we're still a morally upright society. We want to know where you're getting your money from and what issues, because whoever pays the piper is likely to call the tune when the person gets into the house. But that does not necessarily mean we do it the wrong way. And hence, I see this as an interim thing. We clean up, we go back to default settings, and then we sit in the next house early enough for those who will be lucky to be here, and now look at what we need to do with our electoral financing. What mechanisms do we need to put in place? How do people fundraise so that, because also it's an important thing. We need to encourage the Kenyan people to fundraise for their candidates. Right now, as a candidate, you fundraise for the people. You are forced to pay into every harambe, to buy a cooking pot for every area, to buy a tent for every area, yet the people want you to represent them. Yeah? So the people don't own you. You seem to own them, or you have bought them through the whatever gifts you've given them. And I think when we continue on that basis, we will never get rid of corruption, because we start corrupting our electorate through the demands they make of us. In the developed countries, it's the people who promote you to be a candidate, and they fundraise for you. They ensure that at some point they're even taking some students now to school to try to train them to become future leaders and politicians, and then they support them so that you then know you belong to the people. They have sponsored you, they have a stake in you. But in our country, it's the reverse. We are taken through, the ringer. Yeah? By the time you are through, I'm not even sure how many of these action committees will have anything anyway, because of our nature. And especially when you start disclosing to the committee that we have now fundraised 10 million shillings, you can be sure by the next weekend, there's a whole pile up of people who have come to say they would also want to be part of ensuring that is done, so that at the end of it all, you may not even have any money to pay for your electoral expenses in terms of agents and all that. So basically, I agree totally that, yes, we retain the issue of the need for disclosure of the amount and the sources, which is important. But in terms of, those expenditure committees, which again, like I said, were borrowed from the law in the US, we can, first of all, put that on the back burner by removing them from the law. Then we will bring them properly when we now know what we need to do for this country. And basically, so most of these things are, again, consequential amendments to removal of the committees. Without the committees, there will be no reports, there will be no expectations of what will be done, audits of those committees, and all that. And the rest is really very straightforward. I hope the public out there understand that this is not about us protecting ourselves, but it's about making sure that we don't end up with complicating the electoral processes with laws that are, as the lawyers might say, may be otious, yeah? May not be, or probably not even applicable, although they are alive, but they have no environment for them to be alive is not there. And in that complication, we could end up with electoral challenges that, with the litigation society that we have become, that would only mess up the output of the will of the people that they have expressed on the 9th of August. So I want to congratulate the committee for having brought out some of these issues, and ask members that we fast track this bill. We really don't want to discuss it so clear-cut. We fast track it so that they can get to the Senate. They also do their bit, and then we can ease the burden on the electoral body so that they are not committing resources to start receiving reports on our committees and establishing who will go to Kibiperi to look at my committee when the matter is overtaken by events. So the earlier we can do it, the better as we move through this. But like I said, it was a good attempt, although poorly done in 2013. I wish I was there. We probably would have done it differently. But again, it copies almost a huge percentage from the US law on this, but again, without the necessary modifications for the local scenario. So with those few remarks, I want to once again thank the committee and ask that we support them in the passage of this bill, and we move on with life. Beg to support.
Member for Arienda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for some time I labored, assuming my card was showing, only to discover it wasn't. So I'm glad now I am visible. Mr. Speaker, I want to support this amendment bill, and I want to congratulate the committee. Mr. Speaker, in my view, the law as is right now is highly ambitious, fantastic, and near utopic, especially in our circumstances where we do not have the necessary financial and legal infrastructural support for the kind of things that it provides for. And I agree with the majority leader that it is of no point to make provisions that are unenforceable in your circumstances. Mr. Speaker, I want to suggest that, for example, Section 7 that is to be repealed, which provides for the expenditure committee, it makes provision for a committee, assuming that that committee will probably work pro bono. And it does not even say who's to finance the committee in terms of expenditure or emoluments. That is imaginary. No one will work pro bono in such circumstances. Section 10, that talks of filing a report with your political party if you are a candidate. Political parties in this country are funded to a certain limited extent, mostly by default. Even now, my party of ODM, I think, is owed almost 6 billion Kenya shillings. But even when they are funded, they never fund the candidates. So why should I make a report to a political party which does not give me even a shilling? On what principle? Mr. Speaker, when you look at Section 27, that gives the leeway to invite the Auditor General to audit even the expenditure of an independent candidate. You can imagine how many independent candidates we have from the level of MCA to MP, all the way to governor and possibly even president. It makes that provision without talking about who will fund the Auditor General. The Auditor General is funded, underfunded as we speak, and has to really stretch, to audit the public institutions under its charge. If you are to extend to this, their work will be diluted and it will be impossible. Mr. Speaker, I agree that we need to carry this along. Indeed, we will need to rethink in future how really we want to regulate campaign financing, because the model so far that we've adopted is not suitable to our circumstances. The English used to say that just like English law, it must be unique, like the English baobab. You cannot just hope to take it and supplant it and it works. My only question, Mr. Speaker, to the chair, and this is a question I wanted to indicate in respect of the early amendment. When you see, for example, what is now section 16, after section 7, the amendment there, they still read a candidate political party and a referendum committee, and it continues. That is the language so far adopted in the rest of the Act and also in the Elections Act. We just made amendments in the recent weeks where we have provision for a coalition political party. And I want to urge that as we are going to consider the amendments, let every such provision read a political party or a coalition political party to cover instances when it's not just an individual political party. With that, Mr. Speaker, I support.
Member for Kitui Central.
Yeah, thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for also giving this opportunity to contribute to this important bill. And I want to start, Honorable Speaker, by also thanking the committee for coming up with these important amendments. And more so, bearing in mind, Honorable Speaker, that the regulations were actually nullified by this House, which means, Honorable Speaker, there is a likelihood of some clauses hanging and be not very clear. So this initiative to make this amendment is very good and is commendable. So, Honorable Speaker, as I support, just want to make 3 observations, Honorable Speaker. The first one, I agree with those who are saying, Honorable Speaker, that campaign financing in this country is not a public function, it's a private function. Honorable Speaker, most of the people who aspire to be politicians in this country go out of their way to look for resources. Some would sell family property. Some would go out there, get loans in the banks. Others would even do fundraising using their friends. And that being the case, Honorable Speaker, I don't see at what point the law would expect me to have my own private resources or my own money being then managed by a committee. Because at the end of the day, Honorable Speaker, this being my own money, I'm supposed to be dictating how to use that money and who gets the money. So to me, the fact that there is no public financing of campaigns in this country, I think then this particular clauses are misplaced. And that's why I agree with the committee that then we need to get them out of this law till we get to a level where we can, in a very structured manner, agree on how to conduct our campaign financing. The second point, Honorable Speaker, is the issue which has been mentioned by Honorable Otiende, the issue of expecting the Auditor General to go out there and audit accounts of independent candidates. Looking at the number of independent candidates and looking at the number, the many public institutions the Auditor General audits, Honorable Speaker, I think we are expecting too much from this particular office, which we are all aware as a House that it's already underfunded, it is already understaffed. So we are actually trying to create a responsibility which cannot be implemented because of the numbers. So, Honorable Speaker, for me, I think really this, and even if you look at the kind of money we are pushing the Auditor General to start auditing, majority of the people will spend between 10 million to 30 million. We are saying that the Auditor General should create time, set aside resources to come and look at my resources as an independent candidate where I've only spent 10 million, while the same Auditor General is expected to audit a constituency called Kitui Central, which has a budget of about 100 million every year, And he has no time for that because of the shortage of staff. So, Honorable Speaker, I think really we need to be serious in terms of this law. And that's why my humble request is that, honorable members, we support these amendments. And even as we support, then we look for a way of fast-tracking the passing these amendments so that it becomes an act of parliament. In that way, then we'll be able to secure and achieve the objectives we are targeted to achieve. But for the future, then, we need to come up with another law, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Kimunya had said it was like there was an oversight 2013. Now I know, Honorable Speaker, we are at a stage where we've learned a lot, we are experienced now more, and then we can craft a law which can then help this country and seriously help the issue of campaign financing. With those many remarks, Honorable Speaker, I support. Thank you.
Member for Kwanza.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the chance. And on the very, very onset, I want to support the committee for coming up with this amendment. First and foremost, this is an issue. This is something that is not applicable in this country. Mr. Speaker, I have been in politics for some time. I've participated in the election almost 4 times, or 5 times to be exact. And this is not workable here. I think whoever was proposing this, to me, is somebody who does not know what is happening. First and foremost, Mr. Speaker, the proposal here and the amendment that has been made, to me, is quite inadequate, because campaign funds in this country are private. I look for money. I may raise it from my relatives, from my friends. I may raise the money by selling part of my property, and that has been the case all the time I've been in politics. And therefore, for me to be able to surrender this to the committee, I run a risk of somebody, and in this country, the Speaker, we are all corrupt. People are corrupt. We have that problem that is with us in this country. It's possible, but it's possible, the majority, it's possible somebody can come and buy your committee. Tomorrow, you have nothing. And then, of course, when you have finished your campaign...
So when you say, Honorable Wanyonyi, you say now you are all corrupt. That, of course...
including myself. Including myself.
No, it doesn't get this way. It says that.
Mr. Speaker, not with a light touch, but on a serious note, Mr. Speaker, this country, we are actually trying as much as possible to see how best we can be able to run our country. But there are people, there are elements. You can bring even your own brother, who may even come in and sell you, and you find the funds are gone. So what do you start with? So this is actually an American philosophy, and I don't think that's applicable here. And in any case, you audit the money that is my personal. So I think this amendment is correct, and we should be able to support it. And let's implement it as soon as possible before we go for election. So that at then the worst part of it, that after you have raised the money, you take it and then you have finished the election, and maybe there's a balance of a month, 2, 3, 4 million shillings, and it goes to the charity. It doesn't make sense in this country. And therefore, I think this amendment is quite good, and I think we should be able to raise it and finish it so that we implement it before the next election. I support the amendment.
everyone in this country, and people live in the counties, and that is where, in the counties, that is where people really get service delivery, Honorable Speaker. Now, when we look at also the proposition of this bill, is that the national government is supposed to actually look for mechanisms of raising revenue, but if there's any shortfall, then the shortfall is not borne by the county governments. And this is a plus because it will ensure that the national government is really looking for ways and means of ensuring that there is money that will eventually go to the counties. Because when it comes to real service delivery